Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sip&Awe, where God puts the awe in awesome. And today is Wisdom Wednesday. Oh, yeah. You know what time it is. I hope you guys are doing great. Today's episode was a blessing to me. This interview was absolutely amazing, but we'll get to that in a second because it is time for the Sippy. Are you guys ready? Here we go. Thank you, Lord, for this day that He's made for you and me. Dos, tres. For those of you who didn't know, that was Spanish for 1, 2, 3. Today's episode is from a guy named Darryl. And I'm not going to say his last name, only because I forgot to ask how to pronounce it. And so I don't want to butcher it. I don't know if it's Lyons or Lyons. I know that seems very unprofessional that I don't even know his last name, but I forgot to ask. Okay, and there's Grace. Okay, but he is a financial individual who works, he's a CEO for Pax Financial Group, and I'll put the link in the description if you guys want to check that out. But he answers some really cool questions that I had regarding finances, and a lot of people struggle with money. Now that I'm an adult, now that I'm on my own, I'm not saying that I struggle financially, but as I'm reading, me and my wife are reading Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover. And the more we read it, we realize we're doing the things that he says not to do, okay? So money is huge. And Darryl mentions this, that finances is mentioned over 2,000 times in the Bible. So God has something important to say about it. And so enough with me. Let's get in there and let's meet my buddy, Darryl. All right, welcome to Sip&Awe, Darryl. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us about Pax Financial Group.
So PAX is what is considered a registered investment advisory firm, so we help people make money decisions. We currently help about 1,400 households, and I've been doing it since 1999. We first got a lot of momentum from a guy out of Nashville named Dave Ramsey.
I
was on his advisory council, and
Wow.
He really helped us get to where we're at today. And so
Very cool.
We've since kind of separated, nothing bad, we just kind of outgrew, so to speak, the program that we were under. But that was really the genesis for our start. Yeah.
Very cool. Now tell me, why has the Lord put on your heart finances? Is that just like a gift that you had? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I didn't grow up with money, and when I was edging the skirting. So when you live in a mobile home, there's skirting on the edge, and you've got to edge it. And so when you edge it, you got to be careful you don't crack the skirting. And so I thought, man, how do people have houses without wheels? That was kind of my how do you get a big thick foundation? And so that was at 17 and 18, somewhere around there, and I hadn't stopped being curious about money. I mean, even like during COVID, I was curious. I went to law school and studied the wealth management piece of law. And I still am curious to this day. So God put it on my heart at a young age, which is beautiful in a lot of ways, because when you grow up and circumstances are challenging, it's kind of a Romans 8:28. So God uses all things for good. And so there was a lot of tough moments growing up financially, but God was really shaping me to really lead other people. And I've been able to do that really more than I would have ever thought.
Very cool. What do you think is the biggest mistake people make when it comes to finances?
Ooh, good question.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that, obviously spending more than you make is the kind of, that's the low hanging fruit. But I would actually suggest to you that it's worrying about money.
Okay. Wow.
And it's because, I've sat down with literally probably over 10,000 people. I've never done the math, but talking to them about money, people are all struggling with the same things. And, it's challenging, paying for your kids' braces or paying for health insurance now, and your grocery bill is more expensive, of course, because of inflation.
Yeah.
And just worrying about tomorrow. I think, how much damage that does to our physical bodies and how useless it is in terms of progress.
Right.
So I think that I would suggest to you that one of the things that I've seen over the years is just, even on my life, is I think that was just a waste. And as you grow older, you're like, yeah, it was a waste. I shouldn't have worried so much. I should have just let things play out, and God would have worked it out.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the coolest answers I've ever heard because it's usually like, oh, people don't start saving at a young age, or people spend more than they actually make is a common answer that I hear. But the fact that you say it starts with us and it starts with worry is actually very fascinating. So I heard a minister, a pastor, talk about how anxiety is actually the root of anxiety is pride because we put so much on ourselves. When it comes to finances, I'm anxious about my money because I need to make more and I need
Mhm.
to do more. And so once we give our finances to the Lord, that's where it becomes more easier and more peaceful. And so in what way, maybe in a natural way, can we give our finances to the Lord or let the Lord direct our finances?
Well, yeah, I mean, the word antidote, like anti doesn't in the original Greek, and I'm not a scholar in that space. It's just this is one specific area I've studied, but
Yeah.
in the original Greek, anti doesn't mean like against, like you think of antichrist. It means in replace of. So the antidote to worry, which most of our worries are rooted in money, the antidote is actually a paradox because it's actually giving.
Mm,
It's actually giving. And so the challenge for Americans in general is that we don't give that much. I mean,
yeah.
on average, Americans give about 1.5%. Christians give about 1.8%. But if you kind of like peel that back a little bit more and talk about maybe casual Christians versus those that are actually more committed, maybe read the Bible and go to church,
Yeah.
that's a little higher. So that's probably around 3%.
Okay.
It still falls short of, and again, from a theological perspective, you could suggest 10%, and that's fine. But really, I think that what we find is that we absolutely could be more generous,
Yeah.
and I think we'd be surprised if our generosity increased, what that would do to our anxiety.
Yeah,
And I
for
think
sure.
there's a spiritual connection there.
Yeah, why do you think people aren't generous? Is it because they're anxious or they feel like they don't have enough?
Oh, yeah, I think there's two ways to answer the question. First of all, there's the spiritual question, and then there's the financial advice question. So,
Right.
financial from a financial advice perspective, we absolutely love to spend stuff. There's a dopamine hit there.
Mm,
I studied this area called behavioral finance, which is kind of the collision of psychology and neuroscience and finance, and this dopamine hit of spending is real. And so we spend. The marketing machine is certainly real.
yeah.
One click payments. I've got Amazon boxes on my doorstep, so I get it.
Yeah.
Um, and then we get in over our head, and then we can't get out of it. So there's that piece. And then there's the spiritual component, like you had referenced, that to a certain degree we've kind of violating kind of the first commandments that you'll put no the first commandment, you'll put no other God before me. And so
Right.
we're putting ourselves as God to a certain degree. And so I think for Christians, we have to look at the spiritual side and ask ourselves, why are we having such a hard time giving? And then from when I sit down with people financially, you can usually find the room. It's a matter of just wanting to put it first.
Yeah. And so whenever you're dealing with individuals or when you're dealing with a financial issue, where's like your starting place? Is it starting with their income? Is it starting with the root of the issue? Like where do you start when someone's in debt or whatever you're dealing with?
Um, yes. So it certainly depends. Um, it's a really good question, but yeah, the income. A balance sheet will be the first place.
Okay.
So a balance sheet will be assets minus liabilities equals net worth,
Okay.
and that's kind of the best scorecard.
Yeah.
I think I've been poor and I've
Mm.
been rich, for lack of a better word. We're the richest nation in the history of the world, so to a certain degree, we're all rich.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but the balance sheet is the best scorecard of a net worth statement. It's kind of the one
Yeah.
and the same. Balance sheet is more business, net worth is more personal. Poor people or broke people, they think in terms of payments. Like that's all they think about is what's my payment going to be. And
Right.
so rich people, they think of this net worth statement, assets minus liabilities. And so the first thing I'll look at is that and say, do you have too much in the liabilities and do you have too few assets? Sometimes it's just a matter of shifting those assets. So for example, hey, you have too much in liabilities, so we need to sell the car and pay off those liabilities. So sometimes it's just a matter of moving things on that net worth statement. Everyone should do a net worth statement and then track it. I love tracking net worth statements. I've seen people over 10 years move from having I'm worth $10,000 to $1 million just by making changes in their lifestyle.
Very cool. Um, Let me think. So, how long have you been saved?
So when I was 12, I became a Christian. I
Cool.
accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior, and then I was baptized, and then I had um, what I love about just the way God has worked through my lives. There's been inflection points where I just the Holy Spirit did a good work, and there was times where I wasn't living it out, just like most people. Mhm.
Yeah. So with your company, with your financial group, are you guys openly Christian or is it more like a kind of like a closed off
Covert
company? Yeah.
Christians, yeah, we're fiduciaries, which is a legal term. Fiduciary is a responsibility to put
Okay.
somebody's best interest above ourselves. We're fiduciaries who honor Judeo-Christian values.
Okay.
And so not everyone in our organization is a Christian,
Right.
but we are called to honor Judeo-Christian values. And
Yeah.
that's what we do.
Yeah. So when you say everyone in your program's not saved, are you saying like your employees or the people that you serve or both?
Both, yeah, both. Mhm.
Cool. As a Christian, I'm really curious on what you have to think. As a Christian, how do you employ non-believers or I don't even say like why like I don't want to say ask you why would you help a non-believer, but what is your heart when it comes to helping a non-believer or hiring a non-believer?
Yeah, we have laws we have to follow.
Yeah,
That's really the bottom line is you've got to follow the law. I can't exclude people
right.
if they're not a believer. I just have to tell them, you can work here and not be a believer, but just know you might be uncomfortable with the conversations we have about our faith. And
Yeah,
if you're okay with that, then cool. And usually people self-select out when they hear that.
cool.
But then again, how do I know somebody's sincerity in their belief? Because a lot of people go to, they may go to church on Easter and
Right.
Christmas. And
Yeah.
so it's not until they get there that you're like, oh, so you said you believe in Jesus, but I'm not seeing the fruit. So a lot of times I don't even know until they're actually, doing life with them.
Right. Very cool. I love that answer. Have you ever had any like cool people convert that have worked for you or people giving their life to Jesus while being under your business?
Yeah, but I've had some negative stories. Can I share a negative story?
Absolutely. Yeah. Give it to us.
I had one client that was an atheist and devout atheist, and so I had developed a rapport with him, and I walked a lot of life with him. Like
Okay.
his brother killed himself with
Yeah.
alcohol abuse,
Yeah.
and so I just walk life. And when you're dealing with money, you walk life with people. And so I wanted to take him to lunch just to hang out, and I take him to lunch, and we bring up the idea of the afterlife, and then. Man, I love Jesus. And so I'm going to talk to people about Jesus. Now, this
Yeah.
is one of my biggest clients, and he's an atheist. And so I'm going to unpack this idea of my belief system. And I do, by the way, I'm not like a adversarial guy. I don't like to pick fights with people.
Yeah. I'm the same way.
And so I'm just having a dialogue about my convictions. Well, he pulls all his money out like the very next day. Like, I'm done with this guy. Never would
Wow.
have thought after that conversation, but I would do it again.
Yeah. Man, that's so cool. Did he tell you why he pulled out his money out or?
Well, he wouldn't talk to me anymore, but I got in touch with his wife, and she really didn't have a good reason, but
Yeah.
she said it was probably likely because of that conversation. He didn't like
Yeah.
it.
Well,
So that's okay.
speaking of stories, if you can, could you share maybe a story about someone who's really, really in a bad spot financially and God just worked a miracle and set them free?
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm trying to think. There's been more than a handful. Um, yeah, I know one person in particular. He was making like $700,000
Wow.
and like a ton of money, and then lost his job
Man.
and went to a dark place. Um, like depression, anxiety, just and not just like a month or two, like a couple years.
Yeah.
And it was in that valley that God took his heart and reconstructed it
Yeah. Cool.
and had him rethink everything. and he is such a good grounded man today. I mean,
Cool.
life is not about stuff anymore. I mean, he does just like all of us. We like to drive cars that work, and we like to eat a steak sometimes that tastes good. Like there's no doubt. But man, his love of money. Remember in the scriptures it says, um, you can hate one or love the other. You can be devoted to one or despise the other, but man cannot serve both God and money. And so I
Yeah.
think that God had to do some surgery on him,
Yeah.
and he did, and it was
Yeah.
awesome.
In a natural sense, can you kind of describe for the people listening what serving money looks like?
Yeah, I think if you take a look, and all of us could take a look at this and at what our spending looks like,
Hmm.
and even this happens a lot. Even spending on other people can sometimes be selfish because if you really step back, sometimes it's just getting some affirmation and praise from somebody else.
Yeah.
And so if you take an inventory of your spending, if I took a look at all your debit card or credit card transactions, I know the type of person you are.
Yeah.
I would know exactly who you are and what you believe to be true and what you stand for. So sometimes, like politicians, there's one politician that talked about has love for the community, and I won't say his name, but he's not in the presidential race anymore. He dropped out a while back, but talked about his love for the community, his hunger for people, and then they got his tax return and his giving. He didn't do any giving, none.
Yeah.
So that hypocrisy doesn't exist in just politicians; it exists with all of us.
Yeah. I really enjoyed how you said that, like, even us serving people or like buying someone coffee could be selfish in a way because we're just kind of looking for that praise. I've never really thought about that before because I've thought about, man, I should give more or I should be more generous. But I've never thought about the root of someone could be giving is because they just want praise or they give the most in the church because they know the pastor's going to mention them um, like this Sunday. You know what I mean?
It's tricky because there's two different scriptures that really are challenging. One is which don't let your right hand know what your left hand is doing, right?
Yeah.
So to a certain degree, Christians kind of say, okay, I know some Christians that say, I don't want to tell anyone that I'm giving. And then at the other side, I think even in Matthew, it says, let your light shine before men so others can see your Father in heaven.
Yeah.
And again, I'm paraphrasing, but how do you reconcile these two seemingly contradictory descriptions of how to give? And I think that Jesus always comes back. It's a heart thing, but there
Absolutely.
are there are times where I have a process that, in fact, I can even share this with you. My process of giving is when I give to secular organizations
Mhm.
outside of the Christian community, I actually have no problem them knowing that it's me because I feel comfortable enough that I'm not seeking out I take inventory in my heart, but I feel comfortable enough
Yeah.
but I want them to see my God in heaven because Christians over the years, nobody knows that Christians give.
Yeah.
Like there's a ton of giving and we just don't know. When I do it within the Christian community, nobody knows.
Yeah.
And so that's just my process of reconciling those two scriptures.
For sure. I like that because it talks about in Matthew, when you pray and fast, do those things in secret because when people praise you, that's your reward. And so it just comes back to a heart posture. If am I giving $100,000 because I know the pastor's going to mention my name, like that is your reward. But if you give it unto the Lord in secrecy, um, I think your heart is more pure. I don't want to say it's not pure when you have the wrong intentions, but
Yeah, it's a great challenge and one I think that we all, really should enjoy wrestling with. And I mean, I think remember there's over 2,000 scriptures about money. That's more than prayer and more than faith combined. So
yeah,
this is not a joke to our creator. This is like
right.
serious stuff. And so all of this stuff, if we're wrestling and if our head's on the pillow and we're thinking about giving and doing it in the context of doing it the right way in Christ, then I think we've automatically not created, but enjoyed the antidote to what could be anxiety, worrying
Mm,
about money.
yeah,
So
for
God's got
sure.
this thing rigged that way.
Very cool. I'd love to talk about your company a little bit more. Tell me about how it started. Did it start like kind of like Amazon or Apple, where it started in a garage and now it's this huge corporation, or how did your company start?
Well, so before I bumped into a couple guys that we partnered together, man, I didn't know anybody. When you start out in this business, the best way to start out is having rich family. And,
Yeah.
I knew people in trailer parks and college graduates. And so I knocked on doors in the entire city of San Antonio and beyond.
Mm.
And I had to go and for gas, because I ran out of gas, I took my class ring and I went to the pawn shop just for gas money
Wow.
to be able to make to the next meeting. It was really hard. And in
Yeah.
fact, that's when I first started learning how to give, because in the midst of that difficult situation, I told God, I said, I'm going to trust you. Because prior to that,
Yeah.
I gave when it was convenient. But at that moment, I said, I'm going to give now.
Yeah.
And but then man, I bumped into some people that trusted me and that gave me a shot, and
Cool.
I got a couple clients, and that got me enough momentum, and then I met a couple guys, and we partnered together, and we wrestled with this stuff, and then Dave Ramsey comes along and says, "Hey, I like y'all's heart.
Wow.
I'll give y'all a shot," and then he after that it was we had a good run.
Very cool. How old is your company?
17 years.
Wow.
Mhm.
Very cool. Very,
Yeah.
very cool. More of like a spiritual question. How do you feel about the prosperity message?
Yeah, prosperity means the more you pray or the more you do stuff that God's going to give you more stuff, right?
Yeah.
I'm summarizing it. Yeah, that doesn't make sense to me because um, first of all, experientially, I can't, uh, I've never seen it in practice.
Hmm.
And um, my mom, my mom loves Jesus, and my dad was in and out. They both came from difficult situations. My mom had me when 16. When she was
Yeah.
16, my dad was 20. And so my mom prayed for, a financial stability, and she didn't get it like my
Yeah.
whole life, her life. And so I watched a mom that had this, heard people on TV preaching prosperity theology and just fall flat on her face.
Yeah.
But what God was doing was even better.
Hmm.
He was working in her children. All three of her children now have a God-fearing approach to life and have successful businesses. Very interesting. So God wasn't worried. God wasn't interested in giving her prosperity. He wanted to do something bigger generationally.
Yeah, that's very cool.
So to answer your question, I can't buy into prosperity theology at all. And
Yeah.
I think God's got things that he wants to do generationally,
Hmm.
that even if you're struggling in the midst of financially, taking a step back and trusting that he's got a bigger picture working gives me more peace than even having more money. Because by the way, I've seen multi millionaires who their lives are horrible.
Hmm.
And so praying for prosperity and expecting it actually can be real problematic in a lot of ways. And God's got a bigger and better thing going on than just you having more money.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the people that you know who are multimillionaires, but they're unhappy. What do you think is the root of millionaires being unfulfilled?
It is the love of money. It is the root of all evil. It's unbelievable. I hate to say it, but when you just have this craving for more stuff and more wealth, and God has really nailed this thing when He says you can serve one or two, you can serve God or money, and so they just become infatuated with money, and their giving is just their giving's horrible.
Hmm.
They worship money. They worship stuff. They'll never admit it, but
Yeah.
I look at their bank account and their statements and their net worth, and I'm like, there's nothing here that reflects the humility that God expects from us in our giving.
Yeah. How do you, I don't know if we've already touched on this, but how would you imagine someone in that realm getting out of that or having a change of heart? Do you think it's losing all their money, or do you think it's just like one moment with God has to change that perspective?
Yeah, it's tough because in a lot of those people, a lot of them have gotten to become successful for a reason.
Hmm.
So, a lot of times there's barriers, you got to break through ego barriers.
Yeah.
And and like I had somebody recently that in the newspapers and very wealthy, and his wife left him,
Wow.
and you get to that dark place and you realize, what am I doing? And so sometimes I always say that God gets us on the surgical table, and we want to take the scalpel from him,
Hmm.
and we can't. We got to let him do that good work. So, but rather than that pain, it's much easier if like a brother or sister comes alongside and says, "Hey, man, you need to think about your priorities." It's hard. That's why he says it's easier for the rich man to inherit the kingdom of heaven than the camel to go through the eye of the needle. It's hard to convince a rich person that there's a better way.
Hmm.
It's a really hard thing to sell intellectually.
Yeah.
So usually God has to orchestrate a work, and unfortunately, a lot of times it's through marriage or the children. The children's something painful has happened. If they go to Christ, they'll find the solution. If not, there's plenty of worldly coping mechanisms, and a lot of times that's alcohol or substance abuse.
Yeah. When you look at children coming from wealthy parents or their dad's a millionaire, do you think if not handled properly, you're kind of setting up your child up for failure because you're giving them this life that's not quote unquote realistic, you know?
It's a great question. So first of all, I've seen greedy kids that in the trailer parks, and I've seen greedy kids that are from multimillionaires. So greed exists in both demographics.
Yeah.
So just to kind of lay the landscape, I've certainly seen that. Um, I worry about that personally every day because I don't live in a trailer park anymore, praise God.
Yeah.
And so now how do I raise my kids to where they appreciate life and have perspective? And so I'm not answering your question directly. I might be missing it because there's so much I want to talk about here, but um, there's certain things that you can do to equip your children to be able to leave the house and have better perspective. A lot of that for us has been uh, being engaged in ministry work and involving them in the process of giving to others and conversations about money all of the time. Like not just like every now and again, all of the time. Go to the grocery store, they pull something off the shelf saying, "Hey, can I buy these chips?" And not saying sure, saying how much are those chips, how much is taxes.
Mhm.
And our family, I mean, I'm obviously a nerd about this, it drives my kids nuts, but conversations about money all of the time is a really healthy approach.
Yeah. When do you
Um,
excuse me, I'm sorry. When do you introduce finances to your kids age wise?
um, as soon as I can. I mean,
Cool.
I mean,
Yeah, totally.
for me, we're going really early. I have four kids. My first one, I had spreadsheets,
Yeah.
and yeah, that doesn't work real well. So
Right.
it really, when you study like what's the best approach to raising your kids with money, and you look at like, okay, should I do allowance? Should I do commissions, or should I, what's the best process? You look at all the research, and the best thing to do is not necessarily a system or process. It's just having very raw, real, authentic conversations about money, how you messed up, how you've made good decisions, and just constantly talking to them, making sure
Very
it's
cool.
not private at all.
That's really cool. You don't really hear that a lot. I think that's very wise of you to do that with your children. Yeah, I'm just curious. Where do you think, going back to the whole, you see greed in trailer park children and rich children, is there a, is the root the same in both, them both being greedy, or is it different when it comes to a trailer park kid or a rich kid?
Yeah, I mean, you could make the suggestion that there was like a root cause that the parents had done something, some type of like, hey, the way they raised them, it could have easily been, I get, they got everything they wanted, and
Yeah.
maybe they didn't want a lot, but they got it, whatever they wanted, they got, and so that's obviously that you could easily make those connections, and then I obviously will go spiritually and say there's that's the default if you're not facing towards the cross.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if you remember what you were gonna talk about when I first asked that question, but I wanted to see if you can continue your dialogue. I don't know if you
I've
remember.
already forgot it.
I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
Don't sweat it. This is obviously an important conversation
Absolutely.
for for our community, the body of Christ, and even more people. I just, it breaks my heart to see the anxiety levels in our country now, and to know that there's a solution out there. And money is just a key element of our anxiety, and to kind of unpack it in a real raw way, and
Yeah.
then integrating the spiritual side of it, I think is just more than healthy. It's necessary now.
Yeah. Where do you think, I don't know if it's just generosity, it has a point to play in it, but like there's people who don't believe in God that are wealthy and they're doing great. Where do you think
Yeah.
God comes in to make your finances different or kind of add to your finances? Um, like why put God on your money?
Yeah. So there are definitely, more than a handful of people that you would say, man, they're wealthy. Really, the problems that they have are not material, just normal family problems, and
Yeah.
they don't have God in their life, and they're good people. You would even say they're good people. I mean, so that does exist. I don't know how often, but I think the whole idea of um, the way God had created this environment for us to keep and cultivate, as you might
Yeah.
look back into Genesis, it works better when we are, even if it's working for you, and you're wealthy and you're like everything's clicking, family's good, got a couple houses, grandkids are good.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for the greater good.
Yeah.
And so the idea that it's working for you doesn't mean it's going to work for the next generation, the generation after that, your community. And eventually, the neighbor's crop of bad seed
Yeah.
blows into your field.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we only have about 10 minutes. I don't know if you can see that on your screen.
Yeah,
But something that my pastor said, he was really, really cool. And he was saying that whenever you have a child who's on drugs, you can't pay money to get them better. Or when your wife has cancer, you can't pay money to make them better. And so having the Lord in your life, with your finances, but with everything, just helps you have a better life because Jesus wants you to have a better life. You know what I mean?
yeah, and yeah, I believe the fruit of the spirit is very difficult to manufacture independent of Christ. The love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, self-control. I think you can patch it up and hack it up, and there's James Clear books and everything else that you can read. But at the end of the day, I think that comes from a relationship with Jesus.
Absolutely. If I'm not mistaken, on your profile, it said you have some books, correct?
I've got three books and one coming out in at the end of January. That one's called Biblical Responsible Investing.
Yeah, talk to you, talk to us about your books as we close.
Yeah, the first one's integrating Christ into a small business. That's called Small Business Big Pressure. The other
Very cool.
one, The Grand Money Chasm, teaches grandparents how to teach their grandkids about money without upsetting the parents.
Cool.
Another one's 18 to 80, everything you can do, you need to be doing with your money from age 18 to age 80. And every chapter is an age. So if you pulled up 30, you'd see what you need to be doing at 30, 50. And then this next one, Biblical Responsible Investing, giving you a framework of how to practically navigate the market in a way that's God honoring.
Awesome. Where can we find your books?
So all of them are on Amazon. My next one coming out, you can pre-order through Barnes and Noble only, and then January 30th,
Very cool.
it'll be available.
Awesome. What is your book writing process?
It changes. A lot of times it's blogging to a book.
Oh,
A lot of
okay.
times, yeah. So if you follow me on LinkedIn, I might have. If I'm doing a lot of blogging, you go, okay, he's doing another book. And sometimes
Yeah.
I'll do workshops, and those. I always do things practically, so I'm doing two things at one time generally. If
Very
I do a
cool.
workshop, the content's going to end up being a book.
Yeah. Out of all the books that you have, which one's your favorite and why?
Really good question. Gosh, it's a great question. I honestly think I think it might be my latest one.
Cool.
And the reason being is that I guess I keep getting a little bit older in my the refinement of what's important to me is becoming more overt,
Hmm.
and that you can see that expressed in my content, as opposed to saying maybe you should or consider this. I'm just more emphatic because I really believe this to be true, and that's just a good place to write from.
For sure. Absolutely. I'm doing the podcasting stuff off of Podmatch, and he's like really selling. He's like, if you watch this video, it's going to change your whole podcast. And it's like, I love the confidence. Even Dave Ramsey's like this. It's like, do the
Yeah.
total money makeover, and your life's gonna be
Yeah.
changed. Like you
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
confidence. I guess I can ask this really quick. What's the difference between confidence and pride? Or
Oh, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It's just the heart. Yeah. So, even if you go to the degree of what's the difference between persuasion and manipulation, right?
Yeah,
Persuasion,
that's a good
which
question.
is the same type of paradigm, but persuasion means I'm trying to convince you to do something I inherently believe is good for you.
Mm.
Manipulation is I'm trying to convince you to do something that's inherently good for me. And
Oh
so I think
yeah.
that's the difference between confidence and arrogance.
Wow, that was a really good line. I like that.
Yeah,
It's
thank
very,
you.
very good.
I just made it
Yeah.
up, so yeah, appreciate it.
Good job, man. That's probably one of my favorite things. I'm gonna keep it in here. I'm gonna write a whole message off of that. No, I'm just
There
kidding.
you go. Yeah, it'd be a sermon. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when it came to writing the book from 8 to 80, where did you get the content for when you started becoming like an older individual? Because obviously you're not 80 years old. So were you kind of
Yeah.
connected with people who made mistakes? Like, how did you do
Yeah, I've
that?
advised a lot of people with a lot of ages, and unfortunately, I've advised people who've passed away. So I've had a chance to grow up quickly in my industry, and so
Yeah,
I was able to take the content from those experiences. Yeah.
very cool. That's awesome. This might be a really big question, but I'm really curious. So I had a buddy who passed away last year,
Mm.
and his dad cannot touch his money. And so essentially when someone passes away, if they don't have a will, is their money like untouchable, or is it a long process to get a hold of their money?
It's mainly just going through the courts. If you that's called passing away intestate, and so if you don't have a will, the courts have to say who gets the money, and then they go through a process. So eventually, if he's next in line, according to every state has their own rules, he'll end up getting it. Yeah,
Gotcha.
but it just
Okay.
could take a little while.
Yeah,
They're
is
just not going to keep it forever.
right. So like is there like a statistic like who would get it more? Like if he was married, his wife would get it
Yeah,
over his parents? Okay. Gotcha.
yeah. It's all written out already because I have plenty of people who die without wills. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And
Well,
it's
Dale,
not difficult to get a will online now. You can get them online. It's, if you've got a lot of assets, you should probably see an attorney and kind of talk through things. But yeah, everyone should get a will, and the directives to physicians, like, do I pull the plug or not? You don't want your parents to make those decisions or
right.
family members. So getting all those legal documents in order, it's important.
Yeah, when do you think is a proper or a good age to get a will? Do you think it'd be me being 23 to have a will?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just take inventory and say, would it make the lives easier of those who are going to be crying? And if you want
Yeah.
them to worry about that stuff, that's the main thing. It's not for you, it's for other people.
For sure. Very
Yeah.
interesting. Well, Darryl, thank you so much. Do you have any last words for anyone listening before we end it?
No, I'm such a, if you look at kind of the thematics of all the books, I'm really, my attitude in life, when I was younger was MTXT, mental toughness, extra effort.
Cool.
And so that was my grind to do what I've done and where I've got, where I came from, where I'm at. And but God did a good work on me, and it's expressed. You can read it throughout the books where I really understood better and
Yeah.
really believed the vine branch relationship. And so I would just encourage people just to continue to go back and say, what does it mean to abide? Because he
Mm,
says, apart from me, you could do nothing. So despite the fact that all the things that we're trying to do with money, just stay connected to the vine. I think that's the main thing, and I
yeah, that's
think
good.
you'll find that God's going to do a good work. We may not know it in that moment, but He will.
Yeah. Well, Gerald, that's awesome. I'd love to stay in touch. I'd love to have you on again because finances, like you said, it's mentioned 2,000 times in the Bible. So God has something to say about it, so it's very important. So I'd love to have you on again because my viewers, it ranges from young people to old people. And so I know that you can touch so many people in my audience. And so I have to have you on again. So thank you so much for saying yes to this meeting. And I would definitely love to stay in contact with you, my man.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll talk to you soon. Okay.
You got it.
All right.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Give it up for Darryl. Come on. I mean, really? What? What was that? It was so good. That one liner that he had in there was my favorite. I needed a second, but my time was so limited with him that I couldn't really take the second that I needed. And so let me just take that second that I needed right now. So good. So good. I hope that blessed you. I hope that there was so much wisdom in that video for you, and I hope that I hope it reaches you. I hope it changes your life. I hope it changes your perspective when it comes to finances. Because finances are very important. Of course, everyone knows that if you're an adult. And so I love that we get to do life with the Lord, and we can include Jesus in our finances. And so the questions that I asked really blessed me, because the way he answered them really opened up my mind, opened up my perspective. I don't know if you guys saw, but you guys can get Sip&Awe merch. What? You guys can be looking good and sipping good. Okay, just made that up. I don't even know what that means, but I'm going to keep it. Thank you for tuning in to Sip&Awe. I love Wisdom Wednesdays. Last week we had Dr. David. Today we had Darryl. Okay, and this past Monday we had ZJ on the pod, episode 1. Those episodes are really good. Part 3 is mwah. Okay, so stay tuned for ZJ. But guys, have an amazing day. Have an amazing rest of your week. Thank you for tuning in to Sip&Awe. All the important links that are linked to Darryl, Pax Financial Group, all of his books are going to be down below. You can get Sip&Awe merch down below and follow on YouTube. Of course, you're watching this right now. Spotify and Apple Podcast. All right, guys, have an amazing rest of your week, and we'll see you Monday with part 2 with my buddy, Zach Johnson. Bye-bye.